Hey folks, I'm Jeff Hirsch, and in today's video I want to show you some of the cool new things that Adobe has added to Lightroom Classic version 14.4, which was released yesterday. The biggest feature that they've added is a new distraction removal tool that's capable of removing distracting people from your photographs as well as distracting reflections. So we'll start with the reflection removal. I'll begin by picking up the Remove tool, that's the little eraser icon in your toolbar, and you'll notice that there's a new section down here below the regular Remove called Distraction Removal, and it's got two little subsections to it, which are opened up by these twirlers. One will look for distracting people in your photos, and the other will look for distracting reflections. We'll start with the reflections. I'm going to twirl this open here. You've got three qualities at which you can get it to render this reflection removal: Preview, Standard, and Best. Preview runs the fastest, but Best looks the most accurate. So we'll go ahead and we'll have it do this removal at the best quality. All you have to do is click the Apply button, and Lightroom will use artificial intelligence to try and separate the reflected light in this window from the transmitted light. That is to say, it's going to try and remove everything that's bouncing off of the glass and show us everything that's behind the glass. Now, this is a processor-intensive operation. It'll take a few minutes to run, so I'll go ahead and speed up the video so you don't have to wait for it. Lightroom has finished processing the reflection removal, and as you can see, it's done an amazing job of removing everything from the outside of that window, all the light that was bouncing off of it, and giving us a clear view straight into everything that's behind the glass. Before, after. And there's a slider here that you can use to dial back the amount of reflection removal that's being done. If I put it at 0, it's as if I've done nothing. And if you go in the negative direction, you take it all the way down to -100, Lightroom will actually show you just the reflection, and you can see what was removed there. It was myself and a couple of other photographers standing next to me. That's the material that was actually removed from the reflection in this photo to get us this end result. Let's look at a couple more. Because this is so processor and time intensive, I've gone ahead and pre-processed a number of these so you can see what they look like before and after. Here's the before on this shot. The photographer and the scene behind him can clearly be seen in the reflection, and after applying the reflections distraction removal, we're left with this photograph where the photographer and all the rest of the reflections have pretty much been entirely removed. Once again, if I take the slider that's at 100 and I dial it all the way back to -100, I can actually see what information Lightroom has removed from the reflection, and you can see me standing there with my red hat on pretty clearly with the camera in my hand. Yet once it's applied, you'd never know that the figure was there. There's still a slight leftover of the top of the camera and the hand there, but it's done an amazing job of removing as much as it possibly can from the reflection. Here's another example, same window, different set of cameras. Here's the before, very bright reflection outside, and here's the after where it's completely removed it. Here's another example for you. This is the after the reflection's been removed. Before, well, you could see the photographer and I think the photographer's father standing in the background. And if I dial this down to -100, you'll see, yep, there's me and Dad standing somewhere in Venice outside this window. I love that it actually shows you what has been subtracted out from your image. Quite a difference from the before, when everything is sort of glaring in the window there, and the after, when it's all gone. We'll look at just a couple of more. Here's your before, where a strong reflection was blocking me from seeing the bottom couple of rows of the macarons clearly, and afterwards it's removed it beautifully and gracefully as if there was no windows standing between me. Here's another example, this one shot in Venice. Here's the before, where there was a light glow or haze or reflection bouncing off that window, and here's the after when it's been removed entirely. Another window display. Before, there's a tremendous amount of light being reflected off of that window, and it's pretty distracting. Afterwards, it has removed all of the reflected light, but it's also taken out all of the little lines that were on the floors on the inside. So this one, while successful, isn't exactly perfect. Here's another great after example. This is a carousel that's in Brooklyn Bridge Park, and it's inside a big glass box, and I was shooting it from the outside. Before I did the reflection removal, you could see the Manhattan Bridge and the skyline and a number of things in the background. After applying the reflections removal, I get a pretty clean result. I can still see some of the bridge left over, but most of it's been removed. And of course, if I dial this down to -100, you'll see that it has in fact removed a chunk of the bridge and the Manhattan skyline from my reflection. Here's one more, another store window. In this case, we have a giant bear made out of marzipan. And before the removal, you can see a lot of the scene behind me as I was shooting this. Once I remove those reflections, it's as if the glass has been removed. So the idea here is that this reflection removal tool works very well on plate glass windows that you're standing directly in front of. What it's not going to work on is a mirror or a shiny car door or any other kind of reflective surface. This is very specifically for plate glass windows. And ideally, you want that window to be the main largest subject of your photo. I can tell you, and I've tried this on a couple of these photos, that in an image like this one or this one, it doesn't do as good a job removing all of these reflections from the window. We're farther away from the window, there's a figure between us and the reflections, and so it isn't quite as effective as it is on some of those other ones where the camera's basically right up against the glass looking into a shop or a store. And then in a few situations, Lightroom will do something a little bit strange when it goes to remove a reflection. And instead of removing the reflection, it actually enhances the reflection and removes what was behind the glass. In this case, here's the original photo. There's a nice reflection of the figures off of the glass, and then there's some things that are inside the window. I think this is maybe a shoe store or something. And what I would have expected it to do is to dial back the reflection and show me more of what's inside this window display. But in this case, when it made the determination as to what was reflected and what was transmitted light, it actually ended up enhancing the reflected areas and suppressing the areas on the inside. So every once in a while, Lightroom will kind of give you the reverse of what you've expected based on the way that the AI has interpreted the reflection in that window. That covers the reflection removal. Now let's look at the people removal tool that's part of the new distraction removal functions. When you activate the people removal, Lightroom's going to look at your image and it's going to try and find and mark with a mask any people in your picture that aren't considered the main subject, anything that would be distracting. So we'll activate that simply by opening the little twirler here next to the people section. Lightroom's going to look at my image and it's marked in red everything that it thinks is a person or a person's shadow, and it's going to allow me to remove those once I click this remove button. It has, however, marked a couple of areas at the top here that aren't actually people. I think they're little chimneys or something else, and it just didn't quite identify them. And I can actually click on each one of these and hit the delete key and remove these little masked areas so that they don't get replaced. Everything else looks good, looks like a good selection of what I want to remove from this photo, so I'll just hit the remove button over here. This one tends to run a lot more quickly than the reflection removal. And just like that, everybody has been removed from my photograph. Let's do another one. Now, the people removal section is already open, so as soon as I move to this photograph, it starts analyzing it and marking in red any of the people that it's found. And it's done a great job. It's found people way up here in the distance in the upper left, at the back of the frame, over here, and the people on the path in front of me. I'll go ahead and hit that remove button. It'll take them all out of my photo. It's almost a one-click tool for getting things out of your photo. Now, it's interesting. For this removal down here, it didn't take the figure out. It actually replaced the figure. Whatever was there previously, let's hide this by clicking on the eyeball. Yeah, there were two figures there, and when it went and did the removal, it actually brought a figure back. And if you don't like the results that you've gotten, you can actually click on the little control point for that patch, and you'll have those three variations that you get with generative replacement. So here's number 2. And in number 2, the person's gone. In number 3, they're gone and the path is a little bit straighter. So I think we'll keep that particular replacement out of the 3. Let's look at another example. In this case, you might think that the figures are the main subject of the photo and that the people removal might have a tough time. But no, in fact, it can find all of those people pretty easily. And if I hit the remove button here, it's going to take them right out of the picture. Does a beautiful job of it. You may remember this example because I used it with the remove tool in Photoshop. Well, let's see how remove people works in Lightroom. It's automatically found and masked off all of the people that were in this scene. Let's hit the remove button and take them all out. It does an amazing job. It's removed every one of those figures, and it's done so in a way that looks very natural. So what's going on here is that this tool is saving you from having to manually go in and paint each of the figures you want to remove. We could definitely come up here with the regular remove tool. We could take that eraser and we could mark out all of the little areas we want to remove manually. But with the distraction removal tools, it's going to go in and try and mark up all of the people for us. Here's another example. I'd like to get rid of all of the tourists hanging out at the base of the Arc de Triomphe here. And it's gone and it's marked a few on the edges here that aren't actually tourists. So I'm going to select each one of those and delete those so we don't actually remove that content. And we'll hit the remove button and we'll take out all the tourists loitering there. It does a great job almost all of the time. Every once in a while it'll miss an area, it'll either under-select or over-select, and we'll look at a couple of examples. Let's look at this one taken outside Angkor Wat Temple in Cambodia. So I'd love to remove all the people from this photograph. I'll come down here and I'll open the little twirler on the people distraction removal. Already have my remove tool active. And when I do, it's going to go in there and try and detect all the people it can find. And what you'll notice is that it grabbed up all the people, but it missed this monk back here. It just didn't quite select him. It's good, but it's not perfect every time. Fortunately, we can combine the distraction removal of people with the regular remove tool and get all the pieces that we want out of here. Now these two bits at the top here, this one here, remove that from our mask, and this one here weren't people. It thought that there were people up here, there weren't. There is a person standing all the way back here, and it did mark that person for removal. So let's go ahead and remove everything that it has marked as people, what it thinks are distracting people. And of course, it's brought back in the rest of this monk for us when it removed all the rest of them. So now what I'll do to solve this is I'll switch back to my regular remove tool instead of the distraction removal. And I'll come in here and I'll just paint a little loop around this figure. And because I have detect objects and use generative AI turned on, it's going to do a nice job of figuring out the area that I want to remove. Click the remove button here. And now we've been able to take everybody out of this picture. There's our before and there's our after. Gone with the wind. Here's another example where it's going to do a good job, but it might not be perfect and we might want to tweak the results a little bit. I'm going to open the little people twirler down here under distraction removal, and it's found a number of areas here that it has marked for removal. These are the places where all of the distracting people are in our photo. Click here to remove. And it's done a great job of taking out the people. We have been left with an odd sort of extra figure at the back here, and it's changed the geometry of the arena a little bit. There's our before and our after. So I might come over here and take this control pin and see what the other two variations look like. Maybe it did a better job. Yeah, that's a little better. 2's better than 1. 3 is maybe the cleanest. 3 or 2 are probably better. And if you don't like any of the 3, you can click the Generate button. It'll make another 3 variants for you to look at. You know what? I like that one even better. That looks nice and natural. Here's our before, and here's our after. Here's another example where it's going to get us close, but not all the way across the finish line, so we'll have to do just a little bit of extra work here. So it's detected all the figures in my photo. I'll go ahead and let it remove them all. And it did a great job, except it decided to put a little piece of shrubbery by the edge of the fountain here. So I'm going to have to take, if I can find where that control, that's this control point that affects all these people over here. And I have to either look at a variation to see if I've got a variant that doesn't have, yeah, they all brought things back. I could hit generate and I could ask it to try and generate another set of variations. But if it keeps bringing something back into my frame, like a person sitting there, or several people, or some object, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch to my regular remove tool, and I'm just going to come in and I'm going to try and remove it this way. And it did a much better job of that, and now we have a picture with all the people removed from it easily. So let me show you a couple of examples of where the remove people distractions can fail spectacularly for you. In this image, it does a great job of marking and defining the areas that should be removed, but when I ask it to remove these areas, it frequently brings back things that I didn't want there. In this case, it's covered the pier in ducks and seagulls. I have no idea why it did that, but yes, where this person used to be, it's put a duck, it's put some ducks, some geese back there. Well, clearly this isn't what we want. We want to be able to remove all of these things. I can try to go in point by point and see if one of the variants for each of those points is going to have it completely removed. Nope, I just got a bigger bird there. That's number 3. I don't know what that's supposed to be. I can try and generate another set of variants. I think part of it is that it didn't select the shadow down here lower left. That's a little bit better. That actually looks like it removed the object. Let's see if we can get this duck out of here. And as you may recall from previous videos I've done about this remove technology, you want to make sure that when you're marking an area for removal, you get the shadow as well. In this case, it did a terrible job. We'll see if we can generate that one again. So this is an example of an image that this technology should work great on. And unfortunately, it's giving us ducks and geese and birds that we don't need in our shot. So I'll reset all of that. Now, if I were to come in with the regular remove tool and mark out each of these figures that are here for removal, I expect it'll do a better job. And I think it helps that I'm able to give it the shadow of the things I'm trying to remove as well as the object. Because if you leave the shadow, the AI tries to fill something in to cast that shadow. All right, let's see if we can take out the people a little more naturally now. It did better. It still brought us a tiny little bird over here and another bird over here. But you can see that in an image like this, where I would expect this tool to do a good job, it has struggled a little bit. You probably remember this from the Photoshop demo that I did on the Remove tool, because it in fact worked perfectly on this image and did not replace with any birds or geese or whatever. So here's a situation where it didn't work as well as I expected. Here's another example of an image that the Remove distractions struggled with. You would think that it could do a great job on an image like this, separating out the darker people from the lighter background. Let's go ahead and open up the people distraction removal here, and let's see what it marks out. So it got some of our people, but not all of them. And this is another one of those cases where I'm going to need to combine tools if I want to do all of my removal here in Lightroom. So I'll go ahead and I'll remove the people that it's found. And it did a solid job on those. Looks very natural before and after. Take them out pretty cleanly. And again, I do have the ability, if I want, to play with the variations. If I didn't like a particular job it did on one of these, I like this one the best because I think it matches the tiling on the floor the best. And then if I want to get the rest of these people at the back, I'm going to have to go in with my manual remove tool and take them out that way. In this case, I'm just going to try and draw a selection around all my figures here at the back. Now, in this case, I feel like the detect object has gone a little far, and it's gone way out into the background here. And I'd like to actually erase some of this area that's been marked for removal. You don't want to erase too much because it needs some of that surrounding area to blend the patch in, but I don't think it needs that much. So I'm actually going to hold down the Option key, which gives me an eraser instead of a paintbrush, or I could hit the Subtract button here, and I'm going to erase some of these areas that I don't want it to take out, like these windows at the top here and this column on the side. I've still left some room around the area that it's marked so that it can try and blend it in. Oops, looks like I've missed that area. We'll bring that back in. And now we'll go ahead and hit the Remove button here. And the regular Remove tool, not the distraction removal, people or window reflection, should be able to take care of the rest of it. Did a lovely job. We do have our 3 variations to choose from. That's number 1. That's number 2, and that's number 3. I think I like 1 or 3 the best. They look the most natural. Probably 1. I feel like it's got that vanishing point perspective dialed in pretty well. So here's without the removal and without the people removal, and there's our after. Here's another example where the tool fails spectacularly. The AI just can't find all of the people in this picture to remove them, and it struggles when we ask it to do so. Same with this picture. I would think that the AI could find all of these people against the grass. They're brightly colored, they're vaguely people-shaped, but when I open this up and I get it to detect the distractions here, it only marks this group in the middle. And if I want to remove them, I certainly can with the automated feature. But if I want to get rid of the rest of the people, I will have to come back with the manual remove tool and take them out the way that I did in previous ones. So those are the 2 major new features, but there are a couple more I want to show you. Adobe has made a major change to the Enhance feature in Lightroom. Enhance is the feature that allows you to do AI noise reduction, detail enhancement, and super resolution for enlarging your photograph. If you go to pick the Enhance option off of the menu now, you'll get a dialog that says the Enhance features have moved to the Detail panel. Denoise, raw details, and super resolution can now be applied non-destructively without creating a new DNG file. I'll click the box that says don't show me that message again. So the big change here is that previously, if I wanted to take noise out of this photo, use that AI denoise, you can see it's got a lot of noise in it here. Running the Enhance feature with denoise or any of the other options would create a separate file, a DNG file, and there was no way to really undo or tweak the settings once you applied it. You had to go back to the original. Well, now, if I come into my detail pane here, you'll see that there are checkboxes for denoise, raw details, and super resolution, and a slider for controlling the amount of denoise. So I'll go ahead and I'll check the box here. And this time, instead of making a separate DNG file, it's actually going to apply those changes non-destructively to my original raw file. So it's gone ahead and removed the noise from this photograph. And it's done it at the default setting of 50. And what I love about this new functionality is that if that isn't enough, I can dial it up a little bit. I can move it up to, say, 60 and take out a little bit more of that noise. Or if it's too heavy-handed, I can dial it back down. You'll also notice a couple of little warning labels next to the other two options. If I have denoise turned on, I can't use super resolution. And if I use denoise, it's automatically going to apply the raw details. So that's the big change that they've done to the Enhance tool. It allows us to non-destructively apply those same edits to our photos, and it doesn't generate a second file. The last new feature I want to point out is a change that Adobe has made to how they indicate if any of the AI edits that you have created require an update. There are some situations in your editing workflow where an AI mask you've created, let's say one for the sky or the background or the subject, when somewhere down the line you've made a change to your image that would cause that mask to need to be updated to reflect the changes. Or if you're using AI masks in a preset, it needs to calculate a new mask for the image that you've applied that preset to. So here's an example where I've already gone and I've got a mask in the sky. You can see the area that it's covered by the red overlay here. And let's say after I've added that mask, I decide to go in and remove this little standpipe on the top of the ship here. Using the Remove tool, it's found all the areas that I want it to remove. Might even subtract a little bit of this area to make sure it doesn't affect that too badly. And I'll hit Remove, and it's going to remove that standpipe for me. But the AI mask was created when that standpipe was still in the picture. And as such, the AI mask needs to be updated to reflect the fact that that pipe is no longer there because it's left us a rather ugly hole in our mask. Previously, you'd have a little red dot underneath the masking icon to indicate that your mask needed updating. Now we have a separate icon here in the toolbox, and you'll notice that it is orange right now, and it says AI Edit Status. And the orange is letting me know that one of my AI masks needs to be updated. So I'm going to click this to open it up, and it tells me that my masking is what needs to be updated. So I'll hit the Update button, and it will recalculate that AI mask, reflecting the fact that I had removed that pipe, and now we no longer have a hole in the mask. So the functionality is basically the same as it was in the previous version. They've just made it a little bit more obvious, and they've broken out into a separate icon here, the display that allows you to update those masks. I find the new version is easier to spot, and it's easier to update any masks that may have changed. That does it as far as the large improvements to Lightroom Classic 14.4. I should mention here that Adobe has finally added tethering support for Fuji cameras, so you Fuji shooters can now do tethering directly into Lightroom Classic. There are a number of smaller tweaks I wanted to mention in this video. We have new filters and smart collections available. We can now filter based on whether a photo has reflection removal, distracting people removal, whether it's got denoise, raw details, or super resolution. If you've enabled the feature to automatically write to XMP turned on, there are some performance improvements Adobe has made. Writing to XMP is now paused while you're importing, and when you're working on a photo in the Develop module, it now saves that XMP sidecar data every 10 seconds. There is a new option in the preferences that you can check that says remember the last selection from a source during the session. This is in the File Handling tab under Preferences. Lightroom will now remember your previously last selected image for the 25 most recently accessed folders, collections, and smart collections. This temporary memory resets when you quit Lightroom. But while you're in Lightroom, as you move from folder to folder, or collection to collection, or wherever you're going around, it will remember exactly which picture you were on in the previous 25 folders or collections you were browsing. Adobe has also made some much needed improvements to their duplicate detection during import. Previously, if the file name wasn't a match, Lightroom wouldn't necessarily recognize that it was the exact same file. So files with the identical capture date and time were seen as separate files. Well, as of 14.4, it doesn't matter what the file name is. If the capture date and time and the file size are identical, it's going to see that as a duplicate image, even if it has a different file name. They've made some slight changes for Windows users with the identity plate. Windows users, your identity plates can only use a single text style. Previously, you could mix different fonts and colors and sizes. If you want to do that now, just create a graphic, create a PNG file in Photoshop, and use that as your graphical identity plate. And then the last tweak that Adobe made to Lightroom Classic 14.4 is how missing folders are handled. If you have an entire folder that's missing and you go to click on one of the exclamation points indicating a missing photo within that folder, Lightroom will ask you if you want to locate just the single file or the entire missing folder. And that's what's new with Lightroom Classic 14.4. For more Lightroom and Photoshop videos, be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel and go ahead and click the bell icon to get notified anytime I post a new video. And if you aren't already on my mailing list, head over to jeffhirsch.com and sign up for the mailing list, and you'll get updates on my classes and workshops and trips, along with bonus tutorial videos and articles for Photoshop and Lightroom. I promise not to spam your inbox, and I will never ever sell your address to a third party. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.